Hello students! This lesson is a summary of the Flappy Bird project that we did. I made this video because I wanted to say that making games is not hard if you can recognize the key concepts of them and have an idea how to turn it into your own game, whether it is replica or not. Flappy Bird is all about the little objects avoiding bigger objects, using its own gravity and ability to go up. Everything else are just details. So when you play it for the first time, you notice the bird and the pipes. Those are our key objects, so let's talk a bit about them. You notice that the bird is falling, but it's going up every time you tap your screen. You may also notice that the bird is changing every time you tap the screen. For that brief moment, it seems like it has flapped its wings, and it also happens to get a black eye when it hits the pipe. So for the first point, our bird requires to have a gravity, meaning that it has physics. You probably already know that we need to add a rigid body 2D. Next, about the flying up part. We have to detect the tap on the screen and specify that it moves up by some value. There are many ways to do it, but the simplest one includes if statement, velocity, and force, basically the way we did it. Then for our changing bird, we already assume that we will need 3 sprites which we will animate. The bird will flap when we detect an input, and as soon as the flap animation is done, we will change it back to regular bird. And when it enters collision, it will get a black eye. Next thing you may notice could be the background, and how it seems that the bird is moving to the right. Well, we could make our bird fly forwards and our background to be still, but this time we made the background move to the bird, which is essentially the same effect. To do that, we had 2 sprites, ground and sky. We positioned them, and we made sky child of the ground because we want them to act like one object. What we could do is make a sprite that was sky and background together and place them in our scene. But this way we couldn't use layers, and layers will come in handy later when we start adding obstacles, because obstacles will spawn in the middle of them. And this is not something you learn on your first try. You have to observe and you have to practice to recognize this fact. Now to make an endless background, we could make an endless sprite, but that would be insane. So instead we made 2 backgrounds that are the same, placed them one next to another, and made a script. That script ensures they change their coordinates to the start of our screen as soon as they disappear from it. So how did we know where the background is? Well, that's why we had a collider. Then you could notice the green columns. They are the obstacles and they are moving the same speed as the background is. So we had to make them deadly to our bird and the gap between them to be a score point. So we added the columns, made sure they have kinematic rigid body 2D, like the background. Then we added colliders on each, and then we added trigger collider in between. Later we will add score because we need text for that. Then, this allowed us to move to the text. First game over and tap to flap text, which appear only when the bird dies. So how should we do this? Well, the easiest way is to set them invisible and specify in the script when the bird dies, they become visible. But our tap to flap text is not working yet, that's why we have to write in which conditions it will work and how will it work. First, it works only when our bird dies, and if we detect any input, and it works thanks to the scene manager, which can easily reload the scene. I think you understand this logic. Then you may notice that there's also score text. When does the score count? When we pass the columns. How do we know we have passed it? Well, we have a trigger collider in it. So we can say that triggers count and add 1 to the score integer, then we pass the score integer to the UR score in the game. Okay, then we move to the obstacles. We see that they are appearing one after another. Well, appearing can be done in many ways. We should think like this. Since there will be many of them, and we do not want to create a mess of this game when we run it, how should we make only few and use only them? Basically recycle them. Well, we could do the same thing we did with our background. When they disappear from our scene, we just move them in front of it and give them different Y position, but this time we have done it differently. We used instantiate, which created clones of our columns in the place we previously defined. And you may ask yourselves, how does this exactly solve our problem with making a mess? Well, we will use one and only prefab, and we will destroy columns upon their disappearance. But columns have different Y positions because they are moving up and down, so how do we take care of that? Well, we can solve that by generating random Y positions in some range and using them in instantiate. But how does the instantiate knows when to make a clone? Well, that's why we made a trigger on an empty object and we said that if trigger is entered, then make the clone. And that object with trigger was there for the sole purpose of making clones. We also made another one in the back that destroys every column it touches because we do not want to create too many clones in this game. So those were the basics of the game. Next thing to do is to make sure we press something before we play the game, because we do not want our bird to start falling as soon as we run the game. For that purpose we planned the start scene, which was very simple, had the same background, one button and one line of code on the button collider, which is load the main scene if the button is pressed. Okay students, that was the recap of this game. I will finish our Flappy Bird section with this lesson. And the whole idea was to show you that learning to make games is not something you learn by heart. You need to remember to look at the key concepts and to go step by step. There will be many mistakes, many wrong moves, but you will learn on your mistakes. And I hope that you took this course to get ideas, to learn few things, but also to practice your skills with us, because practice is the only thing that will make you a better game developer.